This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to talk about Bitcoin producers and looters. And I think this is a useful model for understanding the world that I learned many years ago from reading Ayn Rand. There are basically two types or two groups of people in the world. You have the producers and you have the looters, and many of her novels are about this dichotomy. Producers are inventors, creators, entrepreneurs, craftsmen, farmers, ranchers, carpenters, programmers, teachers, engineers, etc. Basically productive people who provide goods and services or work for businesses that provide goods and services that real people actually desire. So those are the producers. By contrast, looters are the people or groups who steal things. Looters are people who break into your house or car and take things or trick you into accidentally sending them money. There are other types of looters as well. They're the licensors. These are the people who take away your natural human right to do something very normal, like drive a car or cut someone else's hair for a living, and then they sell that right back to you in exchange for an annual extortion payment that's called a license. Another class of looter, people who force you to buy something or do something that you don't want to do. For example, in 2020 and 2021, there are lots of places like restaurants and airports, for example, that you could not enter unless you obtained a certain medical service that was provided by just a few large corporations that had thousands of lobbyists in Washington, D.C., encouraging the government to make their product mandatory, even though the vast majority of people had no need for this product. Now, you usually did not pay for this service directly. Instead, it was paid out for you out of your taxes or insurance premiums, whether you wanted this particular service or not. And in many cases, you were subsidizing people who don't pay taxes to get this particular service. This kind of product is often required as well if you'd like your child to attend the school that you're already being forced to pay for with your property taxes, whether or not you think they're doing a good job. And if you don't avail yourself of certain products like these, you're often not allowed to use other services that the government has an effective monopoly over. Now, this is a really strange state of affairs when you think about it, because normally if you don't like something or want something, you just don't buy it, and everyone understands that you just don't want it, you don't want to buy it. But there is a whole class of goods and services that have been foisted upon people for the past 50 years that they are forced to use. For example, what if I personally don't require regime change in Afghanistan, and I think that it's a bad idea and it's a bad thing to interfere in another country's affairs? Should I have to pay for this regime change? What happens if a government spends trillions of dollars to displace the Taliban, and the end result is the Taliban is still in power after 20 years, and then no one loses their job and there's zero accountability? These are the kinds of goods and services that the looters force the producers to pay for. I want to pause here to let you know that YouTube is in the process of banning certain Bitcoin channels. For example, Simply Bitcoin has been banned, and it appears not to be coming back up, unfortunately. So I'd encourage you to retweet my tweet here and help to build community support for YouTube to bring this back. I also want to encourage you to follow me in other avenues in case this channel gets deleted as well. You can follow me on X, on Twitter, at Matt Kratter. Make sure you spell it correctly and watch out for all the scammers. You can also follow me on Nostr by downloading one of the many Nostr clients like Damus if you're using a Mac, or Amethyst if you're on Android. And then you can enter my NPub and you can follow all my same posts there in a very decentralized manner where I can never be banned. And then I'd also encourage you to join my email list. This way we can stay in touch if I'm ever banned. So I'll put a note in the description notes below and in the pinned comment as well. If you join this list, you're giving me permission to send you one email every Saturday that highlights one of my best YouTube videos, or sometimes offers a coupon code for my paid courses. But in the event that I'm ever banned from this platform, this being on this email list could be very useful both for you and for me so that we can stay in touch. So I'll put a link for that in the description notes below. Getting back to goods and services that we don't want, what if you were offered a TV that only played shows that it wanted to, not the shows that you wanted? Would you purchase this TV? Would you buy a plane ticket knowing that you had no control over where the plane was going to take you? If not, then why are you willing to pay for government goods and services that you don't want or need, or that are downright bad for you and your family, and usually the country as a whole? Well, one reason is that in most places, only the government and the criminals have the guns, except for rare exceptions like the US, Switzerland, Czech Republic, and there may be a few other small countries. Another reason that you put up with the state of affairs is you have been programmed by the schools, run by the same government, that teach you that this state of affairs is normal and desirable, even though it clearly is not. Rather than learning that the government is the real source of most of the bad things that are happening in your life, government-controlled schools and media outlets brainwash you into believing that it's actually the other human beings in your country, your neighbors, Democrats, Republicans, whites, blacks, rich people, poor people, whatever the group is. The government tries to convince you that these are the actual source of the problem in order to distract you from the real looters, which are the government and the central bankers. And central banking really is the looters' greatest invention ever. While you need to set an alarm, get up early, get dressed, sit in rush hour traffic, sit in a cubicle for 10 hours, then rush home to sit in more traffic, rush hour traffic in order to make money, central bankers make money at the press of a button without doing any work. You need to work for your money, but central bankers print up the same exact money for free and then use it to fund your oppressor, the federal government, with all of its violence, extortion, blackmail, and racketeering. And even if you live in a different country from the United States, you're highly affected by our military budget and all this free money that's being printed up to bomb people. In the process, your hard-earned dollars are being diluted and losing their purchasing power because you earn these dollars, but central bankers print them up for free and dilute your holdings. And this is why the purchasing power of the US dollar is constantly going down over time. Fiat money is the greatest scam that was ever invented by the looting class, and Bitcoin is going to put an end to it. Bitcoin cannot be printed freely by a government. Instead, the government needs to mine Bitcoin or purchase Bitcoin like anyone else. Bitcoin is very difficult for the government to steal. They can certainly put a gun to an individual Bitcoiner's head and make him turn over his private keys and take his Bitcoin in that way, but this is impractical to do to millions of people at scale, especially if those people are armed, as many of us are in the US, because this is our Second Amendment right. Remember this mental model of looters versus producers when you hear election questions like this. For example, who will create the most new jobs if elected in November, Trump or Kamala? It's actually a trick question because politicians don't create new jobs or real jobs. Instead, they loot productive people and then funnel the money towards unproductive people who provide goods and services that the market doesn't actually want or desire. For example, if you're a business owner, is there a free market demand for being forced to fill out hundreds of pages of tax forms and regulatory forms every single year? Do people want to be forced to stand in line for 2 hours at the DMV in order to retrieve a right that has been stolen from them and then reissued to them in the form of a driver's license? Is there a free market demand for these services? For example, $6 million to boost Egyptian tourism paid for by the U.S. government. Now, I love Egypt and I love Egyptians. I just don't think my tax dollars should be going to boost Egyptian tourism when we still have so many domestic problems at home and so many people who could use the money better. For example, training DHS employees to be their authentic and best selves. This is the Department of Homeland Security, which is another giant government boondoggle. And then we have $45 million for a diversity and inclusion scholarship in Burma being paid for by U.S. taxpayers. Now, Burma has a lot of problems in terms of their flawed judicial system, high poverty, corruption. DEI is not the most important thing for them. And furthermore, this is U.S. taxpayer money. I don't think it should be spent in Burma, just like we shouldn't be sending $3 million to Brazil for girl-centered climate action. This is what the looters are doing with your tax dollars. Now, Bitcoin is humanity's best hope for taking power away from the looters and the unproductive people and putting it back into the hands of the producers and the productive people. And because Bitcoin is highly portable, we will see countries competing for the most productive people, as El Salvador, for example, is doing right now with its Bitcoin and business-friendly environment. So expect the world to continue to self-sort in this way. There will be large areas where only the looters remain, and those can be very, very bad places to live. But there will also be prosperous areas where the producers congregate in order to participate in free and voluntary exchange with one another, far from the greed and violence of the looters. And I should pause and say here, this is one of the wonderful things about the Bitcoin system. It's opt-in only, it's voluntary, you don't have to join it if you don't want to. Unlike the US dollar system, for example, which I'm currently trapped in and I never asked to join, and it's very, very difficult to escape from. So this self-sorting of looters and producers, which is another thing that Rand talks about in her novels, this is what we're already seeing, and I expect to see a lot more of it as Bitcoin spreads around the world. And this is, of course, the sovereign individual thesis playing out as well. Bitcoin is the great shield given by Satoshi himself to us to help us to protect ourselves from the looters, the rent seekers, and the other enemies of a just society that is built on the principles of freedom and voluntary exchange. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments and suggestions for a future topic in the comments below. And also be sure to join the Bitcoin University email list so that we can stay in touch if this channel is ever deplatformed. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.